India just started breathing easy after the Hormuz crisis. Now a second choke point is closing in. The Houthis have declared a maritime blockade along the Saudi Arabian coastline. And the route they're threatening, the el-Mandeb Strait, is not just Saudi Arabia's Hormuz escape hatch. This is the Red Sea, the route that carries Saudi crude rerouted away from Hormuz, and the same route that carries Russia's discounted oil to Indian refiners. Two tankers headed for China and India have already turned back mid-voyage. If this choke point shuts too, India loses its two biggest emergency lifelines at the same time. So how exposed is India really? Can its 20-day reserve survive two blocked routes together? And who does Delhi call next? On July 20th, the Houthis made an announcement that should worry every oil planner in Delhi. A complete maritime blockade on Saudi Arabia. No details on how or where, just a declaration backed by missiles and drones already positioned near the el-Mandeb Strait. The response came fast. Two tankers carrying 2.7 million barrels of oil, one heading for China, one heading for India, turned around mid-Red Sea and rerouted toward the Suez Canal instead. Saudi Arabia has called the blockade claim disinformation. But tankers don't turn around over disinformation. They turn around when insurers and ship owners decide the risk is real. This is not a new front by accident. It is deliberate. el-Mandeb sits at the southern mouth of the Red Sea, and it carries roughly 10 to 12% of all global maritime trade every single year. Now here's the part that makes this dangerous for India specifically. The Strait of Hormuz has been effectively shut through the ongoing Iran conflict. Hormuz normally carries about a fifth of the world's oil and gas. Now with that route gone, Saudi Arabia had to find another way out. It found one. The east-west pipeline running from Abqaiq to the Red Sea port of Yanbu was restored to full capacity earlier this year. Yanbu now reportedly handles more than 70% of Saudi Arabia's crude exports, according to reporting compiled by Business Standard and regional outlets. In other words, Red Sea and el-Mandeb became the backup plan for the primary choke point that already failed. Now, Iran has reportedly asked the Houthis to prepare closing el-Mandeb too if the US strikes Iranian infrastructure, according to sources cited by Reuters. That means both of Saudi Arabia's major export routes could go dark at once. And Saudi Arabia was India's third largest crude source in June, over 7% of total imports. Here is where it gets worse for India. This is not just a Saudi story. It's a Russia story too. India's Russian oil, which now makes up the single largest chunk of its crude imports, largely moves through the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. In June, India's Russian imports climbed to a record 2.58 million barrels per day. That surge happened precisely because the Iran war choked off traditional Gulf supply, and Indian refiners leaned harder on Russian barrels to fill the gap. So the same Red Sea corridor that Saudi Arabia depends on to bypass Hormuz is also the corridor India depends on to keep Russian oil flowing at record volumes. One route, two critical supply lines. If el-Mandeb becomes unsafe, both take the hit simultaneously. So far, tracking shows Russian and Chinese vessels have largely avoided Houthi targeting, since they identify themselves clearly on tracking systems as non-Western cargo. That has been India's quiet insurance policy. But insurance built on an armed group's restraint is not insurance. It's a bet. India's oil planners have one number that should worry them more than any headline: storage. Indian refiners hold commercial and operational crude stock covering only around 20 to 25 days of demand. That is not a large cushion. If both Hormuz and el-Mandeb become unreliable at the same time, India cannot simply wait it out. It has already started leaning on floating Russian cargo parked off its own coast. tapping vessels that were already at sea rather than waiting for fresh shipments. Refiners are also scrambling toward alternative suppliers: Brazil, Angola, Venezuela, the United States, anywhere that does not require sailing past Yemen's coastline. For India, the maths is simple and unforgiving. 2 choke points, one 20-day buffer, and a war in the Middle East that keeps finding new ways to spread. Hormuz taught Delhi that a single blocked strait can rattle its entire energy security. Bab el-Mandeb is now asking the same question twice over. The Houthis have declared their intent, the tankers have already turned back. India has handled one energy shock remarkably well. Its refiners adapted quickly, Russian crude filled critical gaps, strategic procurement prevented a domestic supply crisis. But this new challenge is fundamentally different. This is no longer only about where India buys oil, it is about whether oil can reach Indian ports efficiently. The Houthis may be targeting Saudi Arabia, the immediate battlefield may be the Red Sea. But the economic consequences travel far beyond Yemen. They reach refineries in Gujarat, fuel sanctions across India, factories, transport companies, and ultimately the wallets of ordinary consumers. For India, the next oil shock may not begin in the Persian Gulf. It may begin in the Red Sea. What India needs to answer urgently is whether its emergency playbook built for one crisis is anywhere near strong enough for two hitting at once.